Lord God, we know that you're with us, and we ask you to make us more aware of your presence, that we might have an encounter with you as we reflect on your word, and that you might be made known to us in the breaking of the bread. Amen.
Amen.
Please be seated. Very truly I tell you, when you were younger, you used to fasten your own belt and go wherever you wished. But when you grow old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will fasten a belt around you and take you where you do not wish to go. After this he said to him, "Follow me." The scriptures, throughout the scriptures, we have stories of encounters with Jesus, and almost every time after somebody encounters Jesus in Scripture, it's followed by an invitation to follow. In today's readings, we have 3 accounts of encounters with Jesus, and they're all very different from each other, so we kind of have something for everybody. So the first one is Paul's conversion experience, which is kind of a bombastic, almost violent inbreaking of God into the life of somebody who, is doing something that's against the kingdom, and causes this, immediate and strong conversion experience. The other is Peter's call, where you have this kind of back and forth between Jesus and Peter, where Jesus has to ask him 3 different times, and Peter has to say yes 3 different times before he kind of finishes that experience. And then the third is with the disciples, and it's that kind of experience where they're pretty sure Jesus is there, but they're not totally sure that Jesus is there, so it takes a little bit more discernment to kind of figure out, okay, is Jesus here or is Jesus not here? Regardless of what kind of experience or what kind of encounter you have with the Lord, there always comes an invitation to follow afterwards. And so that kind of begs the question of what does it mean to follow Jesus? I think that there's an idea that's prevalent out there that following Jesus or giving your life to God oftentimes will bring prosperity for you, or all of your life will suddenly be great, things will go well for you. And I think that there's a joy and a peace often that comes with giving your life to God and following Jesus, but that everything in your life suddenly goes well, and that God blesses you with a fortune. Not only is it true, but it's actually the exact opposite of what Jesus himself says. Both in the conversion of Paul and in the story with Peter that I just read that last little bit of, Jesus explicitly tells them, I'm calling you to this thing and you're going to suffer. You're going to suffer. And then Jesus also says, in all of the Gospels, we hear him say, if you want to be my follower, you have to pick up your own cross and follow me. And in Luke's Gospel, he says daily. You have to pick up your cross daily. So I made kind of the wonderful mistake of, at the beginning of this past Lent, I decided, instead of just giving something up that was kind of frivolous, I really wanted to do some serious work with the Lord on one kind of issue of sinful behavior that has plagued me for a long time, and that I had decided I want to be rid of this thing once and for all. And so I said to God in prayer, help me deal with this. Let that be my Lenten penance. Help me deal with this thing. And he did. And it's causing suffering for me. But, so, I was thinking a lot about, what does that mean to follow Jesus? What does that mean to pick up your cross? And I have a bad habit, I have to admit, that I smoke cigarettes. Usually just 1 or 2 a day, so you can give me the lecture after the service. I don't do that much. But I have one daily practice. Just before I go to bed, I usually have my last cigarette, and I call it my cigarette with God. And it, for good or for ill. Some of my most profound moments are during that time. And so it was shortly after Lent had begun, I was sitting outside during this time. And I don't know how many of you listen to Christian radio, but there's a song by Jeremy Camp, and it's called This Man. And the refrain of it says, "Would you take the place of this man? Would you take the nails from his hand?" And whenever I hear that song, I think, and not to downplay the suffering of Christ, but I think, if I knew what the stakes were, it's the salvation of all humanity for this bit of suffering, yes, I would. I would do that, and I think a lot of people would. But so I was thinking about that song because it was in my head, and I hadn't even heard that song, so I'm not sure where it came from God, probably. And I was thinking about saying yes to it, and it was almost, I guess it's kind of between a Peter and Paul experience. It wasn't a real, strong and breaking, but it, almost an audible voice that says, "Adam, you arrogant fool, if you really think that the suffering that Jesus is calling you to is just about physical suffering, you're missing the point." Jesus dying on the cross for us wasn't just about that moment where he endured the physical suffering. It was the climax of his whole life, where he gave his entire self to the mission. And it was because he gave his whole self, because he was uncompromising, that he went to the cross. And so that moment on the cross really was kind of the climax of Christ giving his whole self. And so really when Jesus says we have to pick up our crosses, he's not just talking about the moment on the cross, he's talking about daily giving your whole self to the mission, for the sake of the mission. And so I think when you have these encounters with Jesus, and he calls you to suffering, that's the suffering that he's calling you to. That, like he said to Peter in that call story, that somebody else is going to take you where you don't want to go. You used to be able to go where you wanted to go, and now you're going to go where somebody else doesn't want you to go. I'm sure we all remember the phenomenon it's probably been at least 10 years ago now, but the "What Would Jesus Do" bracelets, and I think people still have them or talk about them. And I don't ever love the commercialization of our faith, that we turn it into something to buy or sell, but something that was good about that, and I think that we should recapture is that's a question that we really should be asking ourselves if we're Christians, not just when it's convenient or just it's a nice little mantra or when you look down at a bracelet and see it, but literally every single moment of your life, before every single decision that you make, you should say, what would Jesus do in this moment? You have to give your whole self, and a lot of times that's going to mean making a choice that you wouldn't make. It means going to a place that you wouldn't go to. It means enduring some sort of suffering for the sake of the mission. And so I think when we have those real encounters with Jesus, that's what he's talking about. That's what he's calling us to, that kind of suffering. I think that some people are being martyred. That still happens. I think there will be physical sufferings that we have to go through, but for the most part, it's really more just that daily choosing the thing that you wouldn't choose on your own. And so we have these experiences, these encounters with Christ. I'd be surprised to learn that there's not at least one person here who hasn't had some big bombastic burning bush experience at one point or another in their life, or may yet have that kind of experience. I think there's definitely several of us here who have had that. Jesus calls us to something, and he has to ask us several times before we can actually say yes. But it's the third kind of experience that the apostles had, that you're not sure. You think Jesus is present, but you're not actually sure. It takes a little bit more of discernment before you can be certain that Jesus is really present. And those are the experiences that we have all the time, and those are the experiences that we have. That's why we're gathered here. Jesus is present with us right now. In the gathered community, as Baptist Christians, Jesus is present. When we read his word, Jesus is present. When we receive the Eucharist in a really profound and deep way, Jesus is present with us. And so I think it's important for us to remember, especially today and every day when we come and we are gathered with each other, and when we receive the Eucharist, that Jesus is actually calling us to follow him, and that is going to require some work, and that's going to require some suffering on our part. But also to remember St. Paul says in his letter to the Romans, if we're united to him in a death like his, we'll also be united to him in a resurrection like his. And that's the central mystery of our faith, and that's what we come here every Sunday to celebrate the resurrection. But especially this season of Easter, we're especially celebrating the resurrection. And so I think as we come forward today and receive the Eucharist, know that we're being called to that kind of suffering, but also know that we can hope in his resurrection. So, if God wills it, may it be so. Amen.